Alright, and so now back on our host, we can go ahead and install our Linux machine. And the flavor or the distribution of Linux that we're going to be using is called Ubuntu Linux. And so I'm just going to open up my browser here and do a search for Ubuntu download. And we should see this Get Ubuntu link here. And I'll have it linked down below. And from here, we can go under the desktop version because we want to have that graphical user interface or that desktop environment. And then click on Download Ubuntu Desktop. And from here, what we can do is download the long-term support version or the LTS version here. And for reference, in my case, the release number here is 24.04. And if you need to find older versions, for example, if you're not seeing the 24.04 link here, well, you can go down to check out our alternative downloads link. And from here, just go down to past releases and click on all past releases. And from here, you can go through this repository here of all the different past versions. However, we don't need to do that, so I'm going to go back. And from this download page here, I'm just going to click on the green download button. And within a second, it should start downloading. And so again, this is a 6 GB file, and so just be patient with the download and let it transfer over. And once it's complete, I'll see you again for the next steps. And now that we have our Ubuntu ISO file downloaded, well, we can head back to VirtualBox and create our new VM. But first, what I'm going to do is some more organization here. So I'm going to go under my Documents, Virtual Machines, and the SOC 101 folder. And I'm going to open up a second window here to my Downloads folder, and just drag over that Ubuntu ISO file into this SOC 101 folder. All right, and so from here, I'm just going to open up VirtualBox. And from the main page here, click on the New button. For the name, I'm just going to call it SOC 101-Ubuntu. For the folder, again, I'm going to update this. Point to Documents, Virtual Machines, SOC 101. For the ISO image, of course, that's going to be our Ubuntu ISO file. And we should be good to go. And so again, I'm going to check off Skip Unattended Installation here and hit Next. And so again, same kind of deal here like with Windows. And so allocate as much memory as you can here to reasonably run both VMs at the same time, alongside your host. And to be honest, you can kind of strategize here and sort of over-resource your Linux VM first, since we're not going to be working with our Windows VM as much during the first section or two. But then once we start working with Windows more, you can then reallocate your RAM. And so I'm going to set my RAM to around 8 gigs here. And for the processors, I'm going to bump it up to 2. For the storage space, you can leave it at default, but I would recommend we kind of match our Windows, storage here. And again, make sure you have pre-allocate full size unchecked, and we can just hit Next. Review everything, make sure it looks good, and I'll hit Finish. All right, and so now we have our 2 virtual machines ready to go, and now we just need to run through the installation process for our Ubuntu VM. And so I'm going to click on the green Start icon here, and it's going to start booting everything up. All right, and when this starts up here, we can just leave it as is. You can see it's counting down. Or we can click into the actual machine here, click on Capture, and then we can select the different options. And so I'm going to keep it at the first selection here at Try or Install Ubuntu and hit Enter. And if you see this loading screen here, well, then you're good to go so far. And from here, we can just run through the installation process. And so we can choose our language, hit Next. We can turn on some accessibility settings if you need to. We can set the keyboard layout, the internet connection. It's going to say there's an update. You can either update now or we can do it later. And from here, we're going to keep it on Install Ubuntu and then hit Next. And we'll keep it on Interactive Installation and leave it again on Default Selection here. For the recommended proprietary software here, we can just ignore this for now. And for the installation screen, well, we can leave it again on Erase Disk and install Ubuntu. And don't worry, it's not your host disk that's going to be erased. It is the virtual hard disk that we just created. And so I'll just hit Next. We can set up our account. And so I'm just going to call my account TCM, of course. For the computer name here, I mean, you can set this to whatever you like. I'm just going to call it SOC 101. Again, for the username, just call it TCM. Password, the very strong password of password, once again. Actually, for the computer name, I'll just change this to SOC 101-Ubuntu. Just in case when we're looking at it in the logs, we can actually, differentiate it. And then hit next. We can select our time zone and review all of our selections, which looks good to me. So I'm just going to hit install. And so now it's installing the actual operating system. And so, like with everything here, this could take a little bit, and so we just need to wait for it to finish. All right, and so that install finally finished. We can just hit restart now. It's going to ask us to remove the installation medium, and so essentially just eject the ISO file. But VirtualBox should have done this automatically for us, so we can just hit enter here. And we're now going to be taken, hopefully, to the desktop. And there we go. And so we can see the login screen here for the user TCM. Just going to type in my password. And there we go. And so if you're seeing this message here, well, you successfully installed Ubuntu Linux. Now, like we did with Windows, let's get our Ubuntu machine looking better by installing the guest editions image, so we can increase the screen resolution and allow for things like the shared clipboard. And so to do this, we can open up the terminal window, and I'm just going to right-click anywhere on the screen and click on Open in Terminal. And this is going to open up the terminal window, which is a lot like the command line in Windows. And so from here, we can just run the clear command to clear out that warning message. And the first command we want to run here is sudo apt update. And this command and argument, like the name suggests, is going to update all of the system package, well, on our system. And so I'm just going to hit enter there, and it's going to ask us for our password because we're invoking this with sudo, and so we're running it with elevated permissions. And so if you run into this yellow warning here about the unit file like I did, well, we just need to run this command here. So systemctl daemon reload. And we want to prepend it with sudo once again. So sudo systemctl daemon-reload. So there we go. And so now what I can do is just hit the up arrow twice to run our sudo apt update command once again. And there we go. It looks like everything is running just as expected. And from here, we need to install a couple of required packages before we can actually install the guest edition CD. And so the command we're going to run here is sudo apt or apt install, and then the packages we need to install are the following: bzip2, tar, gcc, make, perl, and lastly git. And I'll have all of these commands listed down below. We just can't really copy and paste them yet because we don't have our, shared clipboard ready to go. So I'm just going to hit run. And when we run this, it's going to ask us if we want to continue. And so I'm just going to press Shift Y here to put in a capital Y and hit enter. And those packages have now been installed. The next command I'm going to run is sudo apt install linux-headers-generic. And this is going to install the generic kernel headers, which again is kind of high level, but it's something we're going to need to actually install the guest editions image. And now what we can do is run the same command again, but I'm just going to modify the end here after the last dash here, and basically just run a subshell with the $, and then within parentheses here, I'm just going to run the uname command with the -r option to essentially just sub in here our own kernel version. And you might see this message here that we already have, the newest version, and that's all good. And so now what we can do, I'm just going to minimize our terminal here. I'm going to go under Devices and click on Insert Guest Edition CD Image. And when we do that, we should see this little CD icon appear. I can just click on that. And we can see we have an actual directory structure mapping to this CD. And so what I'm going to do is open up our terminal again. Again, that's just going to be on the left, side navigation here under this little terminal icon. and I'm going to cd or change directory over to the /media directory. Okay. And if I run an ls, we can see the directory for my user TCM. So I'm going to hop into there with cd tcm, and then run an ls, and we can now see the VirtualBox image. And so again, I'm going to change directory here into that actual directory structure. And so I'm just going to start typing it with VB here for VBox, and then I'm going to hit the tab key, and it's going to automatically fill in the name of the directory. So I'll just hit enter, and if I run an ls, we can see a number of different files. And specifically, this is the one that we want to run, this vbox linux additions.run file. And so to run this file, I'm just going to run sudo with a / here, and put in the name of the file, and that's going to be vbox. I'm just going to start typing in Linux and just hit tab. It's going to autocomplete there. And then I can just hit enter. And that's going to start installing everything it needs to. And you can see it actually kind of shrunk our resolution here. So I promised I didn't just troll you. This is part of the process. And so what we need to do is just restart our VM now. And so I'm just going to run sudo reboot, and then just give it the now argument to make sure it reboots right at this very moment. And now that we're back in, what I can do now is go under the view option here and click on, once again, full screen mode. And just hit switch. And there we go. That's looking much better now. I'm just going to sign in here, make sure everything is going well, make sure everything's good. Nice, there we go. And so again, our toolbar here is now going to be on the bottom. And what I can do is click on devices, go under shared clipboard, and once again, make sure that's bidirectional, because it's going to really save a lot of time and a lot of typos when it comes to, copying, pasting commands or outputs back and forth. And just to demonstrate this, I'm going to right click on open in terminal. And again, on my clipboard, I have hello world from my host. Going to paste that in. Looks good. And to double check it's working, I'm just going to copy this. And I know you can't see it, but that pasted in no problem on my host. All right. And so with that, we now have our Ubuntu VM ready to go, and our lab is starting to come together. And so I will see you in the next lesson.